The sky over Chicago cracked open like God himself dropped a mirror, and out of that jagged silver wound poured the ships of the Eternal Dominion, thousands of them, black as oil slicks, each one the size of Manhattan, and humming with the kind of quiet menace that makes dogs whine and children hide under beds. Their message arrived before their hulls even cooled, a single broadcast in perfect Midwestern English, warm and paternal, the way a funeral director talks to widows. People of Earth, your struggle is over. Lay down your weapons. Accept the mercy of the Dominion. Resistance is extinction. The president went on television with tears in his eyes and signed the surrender in under 6 minutes. Wall Street threw a party because the Dominion promised stability, endless energy, and a cure for cancer if we just knelt quietly. By nightfall, the blue and gold Dominion banners were already flying over the White House, and collaborators were lining up to shake the tentacles of the viceroy. This smug 12-foot praying mantis-looking bastard named Searock, who kept smiling with too many teeth and calling us darling primitives. 3 weeks later, Jocks Harlan was elbowed deep in the guts of a dead Dominion patrol drone in an abandoned subway tunnel, under the loop grease up to his forearms, cigarette dangling from his lip, even though the filters went extinct, the day the sky cracked. 34 years old, former Marine raider, dishonorably discharged for punching a general who wanted to nuke Tehran to send a message. Now, just another ghost in a city full of ghosts. His little sister Ellie was asleep 20 feet away on a cot made of moving blankets. 14 years old and coughing blood into a rag because the Dominion S-Cura only worked if you had the right genome signature, and apparently Irish Polish mutts from Southside didn't T-qualify. Jocks pried loose a fist-sized power cell, still glowing soft violet, turned it over in his oil-stained fingers, and laughed for the first time since the surrender, a low, ugly sound that echoed off the tiles. Because the cell was warm and humming and stamped in tiny English letters nobody in the Dominion seemed to notice. Property of Lockheed Skunkworks, do not taunt. Upstairs, Searock was throwing a gala in the ruins of Soldier Field, all crystal flutes and bioluminescent champagne, toasting the seamless integration of humanity's most violent world into the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. He raised a glass to the cameras, mandibles clicking with amusement, and said, "These humans fought each other for 10,000 years over mud and imaginary friends. Watch how sweetly they roll over when offered safety." The collaborating news anchors laughed right on cue. Down in the tunnel, Jocks kissed Ellie's fevered forehead, slipped the stolen power cell into the gutted chassis of something he and 3 other stubborn bastards had been building out of scrap and spite for 14 straight nights, and whispered safety's overrated. Kid, across the planet the story was the same. Tokyo, Lagos, São Paulo, Moscow, cities on their knees. Populations tagged and cataloged like cattle, children sorted into viable and excess. The Dominion had done this to 432 species before us. None lasted longer than 90 days once the banners went up. Their historians already wrote the chapter on Earth. Short, pathetic, forgettable. But historians never met people like Jocks or Captain Amira Al-Rashid, broadcasting pirate radio from a container ship in the Arctic. Or old Babushka Katya in Odessa, who'd survived the Germans, the Soviets, and now apparently the entire fucking galaxy, and still had a cellar full of Molotov recipes. They never met the night shift welders in Detroit who looked at the Dominion's unbreakable alloy and recognized it was just titanium with delusions of grandeur. They never met the mothers watching their kids die of curable diseases because some insect accountant decided profit margins mattered more than mercy. In a warehouse outside Gary, Indiana, Jocks fired up the thing they'd built for the first time. It looked like Frankenstein's hot rod had a baby with a particle accelerator egg, patched together with duct tape. And prayers, powered by 17 stolen Dominion cells and the kind of hate that keeps men awake for weeks. The test fired a hole straight through 6 feet of concrete and kept going until it punched daylight on the other side of Lake Michigan. The 4 of them, Jocks, a one-eyed ex-NASA engineer named Doc Patel, a teenage Ukrainian sniper called Sparrow, who hadn't smiled since Kyiv fell, and a former Chicago cop everyone just called Sword, stared at the smoking tunnel and then at each other. No speeches. They didn't need them. They'd all lost too much for words to matter anymore. Jocks climbed out of the warehouse at 3 a.m., stood on the roof, and looked south toward the glowing dome where Searock was still partying with human traders who thought collaboration bought them a future. The wind off the lake was cold enough to burn. He lit another cigarette, last pack on Earth, supposedly, and spoke to the night like it was listening. "You hear that? You overgrown bug?" That was just the warning shot. Far away. The first rumbles of real thunder rolled across the prairie, except it wasn't thunder. All over the planet, in basements and bunkers and barns, lights were coming on red. Angry, human lights. The Dominion thought they'd conquered a species. They didn't realize they'd just pissed off 8 billion stubborn, creative, vindictive apes who'd been waiting their entire history for an enemy big enough to be worth the trouble. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, something ancient that had watched the Dominion burn worlds for centuries felt the first cold tickle of actual fear, because for the first time in 10,000 years, the prey wasn't running. It was smiling. Jocks flicked his cigarette into the night, watched the ember fall like a tiny star, and said the words that would echo across 100 worlds before the year was out. "You call that an invasion? That's adorable." The first real winter after the surrender hit Chicago like a fist wrapped in barbed wire, and the four of them were holed up in a half-collapsed brick foundry on the south side that still smelled of molten steel and old blood. The furnace they jury-rigged from Dominion Shield emitters kept the place just warm enough that spit didn't T-freeze before it hit the ground, but not warm enough to stop Ellie's cough from sounding like gravel in a blender every time she breathed. Jock sat on an overturned bucket cleaning the carbon scoring off the rail coil of the Frankenstein gun. They denamed Shirley because she was big, ugly, and temperamental as hell, while Doc Patel hunched over a cracked tablet trying to reverse engineer the Dominion's encryption so they could hijack the orbital defense grid everyone still pretended didn't exist. Sparrow was on the roof with a 50 cal made from sewer pipe and spite. And Sarge was teaching a dozen new kids how to strip and rebuild an AK in under 30 seconds, because the bugs hate surprises and were fixing to be one giant surprise. Jocks hadn't slept in 4 days. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in Sangan, 22 years old, dragging his best friend Tommy Ortega through poppy fields while the sky burned red with tracer rounds. Neither did the Corps, not after Jocks put that general on his ass for wanting to glass a city full of civilians just to prove a point. The dishonorable discharge was the best thing that ever happened to him. It cut the last string tying him to people who thought war was a PowerPoint slide. Now the war had come to his doorstep wearing a smile and handing out cancer cures like party favors. And the only thing keeping him sane was the 14-year-old girl dying 20 feet away because the Dominion decided her DNA was non-optimal. Ellie knew she was dying. Kids always know. She just didn't want Jocks to carry it alone, so she pretended the blood on her sleeve was from a nosebleed and spent her nights sketching pictures of the sky before the cracks appeared blue endless full of contrails and possibility. She left the drawings where Jocks would find them, taped inside his toolbox folded into his coat pocket, tucked under the coffee mug he never washed because it still had Ellie's lip prints on the rim from the last normal morning they ever had. One night she caught him staring at a sketch of the two of them on Navy Pier, eating Garrett-ass popcorn, back when his biggest worry was whether the Cubs would ever win anything. She crawled into his lap like she was 6 instead of 14 and whispered, "You gotta promise me something, Jackson." He hated when she used his full name. Only their mom ever did that. Before the stroke took her the same week the sky split open. "Anything, kid." Ellie pressed the drawing into his hand. "When you make them pay, don't let it eat you too. I want you to come back and eat popcorn again. Promise." He promised. Throat raw, knowing promises were just another word for lies we tell the dying. Doc Patel wasn't sleeping either. The man had helped design the original Mars Cycler before the Dominion arrived and declared all independent space programs cute but unnecessary. They took his daughter Priya the first week, 26 years old, brilliant, speaking 4 languages and fluent in sarcasm because she refused to hand over the source code for the orbital habitats. Last anyone heard, she was on a prison hulk above Titan. If the rumors were true, Doc kept a photo of her taped above his workstation, wearing a Caltech hoodie and flipping off the camera. Every time he cracked another layer of Dominion code, he looked at that photo and muttered, "Hold on, baby girl. Daddy's coming." He and Jocks didn't talk about it much. Men like them rarely did. But sometimes, at 0400, when the world was quiet except for Ellie's coughing, they'd share a bottle of something that might have been whiskey once and trade stories about the kids they were failing. Doc's hands shook when he worked now. Jocks pretended not to notice. Sparrow, real name Sofia Kovalenko, was 17 going on 100. She'd watched the Dominion vaporize half of Kihu from her apartment window, then spent 3 months walking west with nothing but a Dragunov and the kind of hate that keeps you warm when the snow is deeper than your knees. She didn't trust anyone, especially not Americans who talked too loud and smiled too easy, but she trusted Jocks because he never smiled anymore and because he carried a wounded Polish kid 6 miles on his back without being asked. The first time she saw him cry silent, shoulders shaking, holding Ellie while she slept, Sparrow sat down beside him, put her head on his good shoulder, and didn't say a word. That was the closest thing to love she'd felt since the world ended. Sarge, real name Marcus Washington, had been a Chicago cop for 23 years, the kind who knew every corner store owner by name and still believed the badge meant something. When the Dominion ordered the department to round up non-compliant elements, he handed in his badge, took the armory keys, and disappeared into the tunnels with half the evidence locker. His wife and 2 boys were in a re-education camp outside Joliet. He hadn't heard from them in 8 months. Every new recruit who showed up got the same speech. "We ain't fighting for flags anymore. We're fighting for the right to be assholes on our own terms. That's worth dying for." Then he'd hand them a rifle and a candy bar he'd been saving since before the surrender. Because kids still needed candy bars even when the world was on fire. They weren't an army. They were a family stitched together with grief and duct tape, and every one of them carried a different flavor of rage. Jock's S was cold and surgical. He wanted Sirach's head on a pike outside the Art Institute so the tourists could take selfies with it when the world got fixed. Doc S was meticulous. He wanted to dismantle the Dominion's entire technological supremacy, one patent at a time, until they were begging for mercy in a language humans invented. Sparrow's was wildfire. She wanted to burn every ship, every camp, every collaborator who'd sold tomorrow for a full belly today. Sarge just wanted his boys back, and if the galaxy had to bleed for it, well, the galaxy should have thought of that before it parked over his city. The night, everything changed. The temperature dropped to -20 and the Foundry-S furnace coughed violet sparks like it was dying too. Jocks was welding a new capacitor bank onto Shirley when the shortwave crackled to life with a voice none of them had heard in months. Captain Amira al-Rashid, broadcasting from somewhere under the ice in the Arctic Ocean. "Southside, you still breathing?" Jocks dropped the torch, grabbed the mic with hands that had stopped shaking since Ellie coughed blood on his shirt that morning. "Barely, Ice Queen, talk to me." Amira's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "We just took down a Dominion supply, convoy 3 freighters full of the good shit. Shield nodes, medical nanites, and something they call a neural compliance crown. Guess whose genome signature overrides the lockout?" There was a pause, long enough for Jocks to hear his own heartbeat. "Ours," Amira said. "Every last human on this planet. They built the off switch into their own toys." Doc looked up from his tablet, eyes wide behind cracked glasses. Sparrow actually smiled, a small, terrifying thing. Sarge started loading magazines like a man who'd just been told Christmas came early. Jocks walked outside into the howling dark, snow stinging his face like buckshot, and stared up at the sky where the Dominion's perfect ships drifted like they owned gravity itself. He thought about Tommy in the poppy fields, about Priya on a prison moon, about Ellie's drawings, about 2 little boys in Joliet who still believed their dad was coming. He thought about every promise he'd ever broken and the one he refused to. Then he keyed the open channel every resistant cell on the planet was monitoring and spoke the words that turned 8 billion grieving apes into the single most dangerous force the galaxy had ever met. "Listen up, you smug, tentacled sons of bitches. You wanted to see what happens when you push humans far enough to stop caring whether we live or die. Buckle up, we're just getting started." The night we decided to hit the Dominion, where it actually hurt the temperature in Chicago, fell so low, the lake itself froze solid for the first time in 150 years, thick enough that the ice groaned like a living thing every time one of their patrol skimmers crossed it. We called the plan prom night, because we were going to take the prettiest girl in school, the orbital relay, station above Lake Michigan and burn the gymnasium down around her. The relay was the only reason their planetary shield stayed up. Knock it out for even 30 seconds, and every recoil scavenged missile, an angry farmer with a shoulder-fired rocket got a free shot at the sky. Amira's Arctic crew had the medical nanites and the override codes. We had Shirley, now mounted on a flatbed semi with armor plating welded from CTA bus sides, and about 400 volunteers who'd shown up with whatever still went bang. It was supposed to be simple. Punch a hole, upload the virus. Doc spent 3 weeks writing on a laptop powered by a car battery. Watch the sky light up like the 4th of July on steroids. It went wrong the second we rolled out. They were waiting. Not the usual insect grunts in shiny armor. These were something new. Taller, matte black exoskeletons that moved wrong, too smooth. Like the suits were wearing the pilots instead of the other way around. They came out of the snow sideways, joints bending in directions that made your brain itch. And the first burst from their rifles didn't burn holes. It aged things. Metal rusted to powder in seconds. Flesh grayed and flaked off like ash. Sarge took a round center mass trying to drag a kid behind a dumpster. 1 second he was screaming orders, the next he was a pile of dust inside empty boots. Sparrow put 3 rounds through the shooter's visor before the aging wave hit her rifle. The Dragunov crumbled like dry cake and she just stood there 17 years old staring at her empty hands while the black-suited thing turned toward her. Jocks tackled her into a snowbank, felt the edge of the wave kiss the back of his neck, felt his hair go brittle and his skin tighten like old leather, then the effect cut off. The thing stopped firing. One of them tilted its helmet, and a voice came out. Human, Midwestern, almost gentle. "Jox Harlan, stand down, we don't want to hurt you." He knew that voice. He'd heard it every Christmas growing up. It was Tommy Ortega, his best friend, who died in Sangan, with half his face gone, laughing about losing weight. Except Tommy had been dead for 12 years, and the thing wearing his voice stepped forward and pulled off the helmet, and it was him. Same brown eyes, same crooked grin, just a little too perfect, like someone had rebuilt him from memory and missed the soul. Turns out the Dominion had a program they never told the rank and file about. They called them revenants, dead humans pulled from battlefield recordings, grown in vats, minds stitched together from neural backups and obedience code. They weren't alive, not really, but they remembered enough to make it hurt. Tommy, no, the thing that used to be Tommy, walked forward through the gunfire like it was rain and said, "They gave me another chance. Brother, gave all of us another chance. Why are you still fighting? Ellie's dying, man. I can take you to her right now. Real medicine. Real doctors." Just put the gun down. Jox's finger was on Shirley's trigger. The big coil already whining at full charge, and for one heartbeat he almost did it. Almost believed the lie that surrender still meant mercy. Then he saw Sparrow on her knees in the snow, tears freezing on her cheeks because she'd just watched Sarge turn to dust. And he saw a doc 20 yards back dragging a wounded kid by the collar while blood poured out of his own thigh. And he remembered Ellie coughing blood into a rag and promising she'd wait for popcorn. He looked at the thing wearing Tommy's face and said, very quietly, "You ain't my brother. My brother died laughing so I could live angry." Then he pulled the trigger. Shirley spoke once, a sound like God clearing his throat, and the revenant wearing Tommy S.'s face became a red mist that painted the snow for 50 yards. The rest of them charged. "We lost 43 people in the first minute. Lost the flatbed when an aging grenade turned the tires to powder and Shirley toppled like a drunk dinosaur. Lost Doc when he threw himself on a kid and took the full burst meant for her. He aged 50 years in 3 seconds. Hair white skin parchment, but he still had enough strength left to shove the virus drive into the relay terminal before he crumbled. The last thing he said was, "Tell Priya her old man finally kept a promise." The shield flickered. For 8 beautiful seconds, the sky was wide open and every resistance cell on the planet unleashed hell. Old Patriot batteries in Colorado, railguns in the Nevada desert, a dozen nukes the Dominion never found, because humans lie better than anyone gave us credit for. Everything went up at once. We watched ships the size of cities crack like eggs, watched the Viceroy's personal cruiser tumble burning into Hudson Bay, watched the night turn noon bright with righteous, furious light. Then the revenants adapted. The black suits sealed, shifted frequency, and the aging weapons started working again. Worse, the relay rebooted with a new protocol, a voice every human left alive heard inside their skulls. Calm, paternal, impossible to shut out. Sirach himself, speaking from whatever bolt hole he'd crawled into. "You have wounded us, impressive, but you are tired, cold, and few. Look upon your dead and know the cost of pride. Surrender now and the survivors will be spared re-education. Refuse, and every city still standing burns tonight. You have 1 hour." Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the wind and the soft crying of people who just realized how much losing actually hurt. Jock stood in the middle of it all, coat burned half off, face bleeding, holding Sparrow up because her legs had given out. The virus worked. The shield was crippled for good, but the cost was carved into the snow in frozen blood and gray dust. He looked at what was left of his family. Maybe 60 fighters still breathing, half of them wounded bad, and felt the old familiar rage gutter like a candle in a storm. For the first time since the sky cracked open, Jox Harlan wasn't sure winning was still on the table. Far above, something vast and ancient stirred behind the broken shield. Something the Dominion had kept chained for 10,000 years because even they were afraid of it. It tasted the sudden bloom of human grief and fury on the wind and opened eyes that had not seen starlight since before Earth's oceans were born. And it smiled. 1 hour, Sirach had said. Jox looked at the sky, looked at the girl shaking in his arms, looked at the place where Doc used to stand, and laughed until his ribs hurt. Then he keyed the open channel one more time, voice raw and steady, and utterly without hope. The most dangerous sound in the universe. 60 minutes? Buddy, you couldn't handle 60 seconds of actual humans. Come on down. We'll show you what happens when we stop giving a damn who lives through it. The last base was a rotting automobile factory on the banks of the Calumet River, its windows painted black and its smokestacks long cold, and by the 59th minute of Sirach's hour, every wall was shaking from the orbital bombardment that turned the sky into a strobe of violet death, We were down to 43 souls, 27 wounded so bad they couldn't stand, 8 kids under 15 who still thought bravery meant not crying, and 8 stubborn bastards who refused to die anywhere except on their feet. Shirley was gone, melted into slag when the revenants overran the ice road. Doc was dust, Sarge was dust. Amira's Arctic signal had gone quiet 12 hours ago, and the only thing keeping the shields up now was a prayer and a car battery wired to a Dominion node that sparked every time another lance of plasma hit the roof. Jock stood in the loading bay with his back against a pillar that was slowly crumbling into powder. One arm around Ellie, who weighed maybe 80 pounds now and burned with fever so hot her skin felt like stove metal, and the other hand holding a scavenged Dominion pistol that only had 3 shots left. Sparrow was on the catwalk above, cheek welded to a busted Barrett she'd dragged in from a National Guard armory, picking off revenants one round at a time, tears freezing on her eyelashes every time the recoil slammed her broken collarbone. The rest of the fighters moved like ghosts between the machinery, passing magazines, dragging the wounded deeper, whispering jokes nobody laughed at because laughter cost oxygen we didn't have. Sarek's voice came through every speaker, every implant, every cracked phone screen still glowing in the dark. Time, little apes. Lay down your weapons and walk out. The children will receive treatment. The rest will be allowed a clean death. You have earned that much, the factory answered with a single rifle shot Sparrow. Again, and the wet pop of a revenant head coming apart. Sirach sighed like a disappointed father. Very well. The ceiling exploded inward in a column of white fire. 3 revenants dropped through on cables, landing cat-footed among the wounded. One of them wore Sarge's face, still dusted with the gray that used to be his body. Another looked like Amira, same scar on her cheek, same calm eyes that once promised the ice would hide us. The third Jocks felt his heart stop where Ellie's face, healthy, smiling, the way she looked in the photos before the coughing started. It walked straight to him, arms open, voice soft. Jackson, it's me. They fixed me. Come outside. It doesn't hurt anymore. Ellie, the real one, burning up in his arms, lifted her head, saw her own face asking her brother to surrender, and started crying so hard she coughed blood across his chest. That was the moment something inside Jocks broke open, not into despair but into a stillness so cold it felt like peace. He looked at the thing wearing his sister's smile and said, "You got her eyes wrong, asshole. Hers had fight left in them." Then he put the pistol under real Ellie's chin, thumb on the trigger, and looked straight into the fake's borrowed face. "You want her? Come through me." The revenant hesitated just a flicker, but enough. Sparrow saw it from the catwalk and screamed something in Ukrainian that translated roughly to burn in hell. She rolled off the railing, hit the floor, shoulder first with a wet crack, came up firing the Barrett from the hip like a goddamn lunatic. The first round took Fakeli in the throat and kept going, punching through the wall behind her. The second took Sarge in the face center mass and turned him into red steam. The third never left the barrel because the real bombardment started. Kinetic rods the size of telephone poles falling at Mach 20. Each impact a new sun blooming outside the factory walls. The revenants looked up, confused, because those rods weren't Dominion signature. They were human, old, forgotten, angry, and aimed by people who'd been waiting decades for a target worthy of the name. The roof peeled away like the lid of a sardine can. Wind howled through, carrying snow and fire and the smell of ozone. Jocks felt Ellie go limp to light, to still, and for one endless second the world narrowed to the sound of his own heart, giving up. Then her fingers tightened on his shirt, weak but there, and she whispered, "Don't you dare quit on me now, Jackson Harlan." He looked down. She was smiling through the blood on her teeth, the same crooked grin their mom had in every picture. "We still got popcorn to eat, remember?" Outside, the sky was falling in slow motion. Inside, 43 broken humans looked at each other across a floor littered with the dead and the dying, and something shifted. Not hope. Hope was a luxury we'd burned for warmth weeks ago. But something harder. Certainty. The kind you only get when there's literally nothing left to lose. Jock stood up, Ellie cradled against his chest like she was 6 years old again, and walked toward the burning hole where the doors used to be. The others fell in behind him without a word, kids dragging rifles too big for them. Old men with Molotovs, a woman missing half her face, still humming the Marine Corps hymn under her breath. The revenants tried to regroup, but the rods were still falling, and every impact bought us another heartbeat. Sarek's voice came one last time, almost curious. "What are you doing, primate? You have no ships, no shields, no army." Jock stepped out into the firestorm, coat burning, hair on fire, Ellie's blood steaming on his shirt, and looked straight up at the sky full of dying gods. His voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "We're not an army," he said. Or what's left after you take everything else? Behind him, the last 43 humans started walking into the teeth of the storm, straight toward the Dominion landing legion that outnumbered them 1,000,000 to 1. They didn't run, they didn't cheer. They just walked, rifles up, eyes dry, because crying was for people who still had something to save. And somewhere high above, the ancient thing the Dominion had kept chained for 10,000 years broke its leash at last, looked down at the tiny, burned, furious creatures refusing to kneel, and decided the galaxy had been wrong about who the real monsters were. The final war started right there, 43 humans, 1 dying girl, and a promise about popcorn against the weight of 10,000 years of conquest. It was never a fair fight. But fair was never the point. The 43 of us walked out of the burning factory into a world that had already ended, boots crunching on glass made from sand and bone, air so hot it tasted like copper pennies. The Dominion Legion waited in perfect ranks, tens of thousands of revenants, insect troopers, and those matte black nightmares, weapons humming, orbital lances charging for the killing stroke. Sirach hovered above it all in his gilded command skiff, mandibles wide in what passed for a smile, ready to watch the last primates die, screaming. Jox carried Ellie against his chest. She was barely breathing now, every exhale a red bubble on her lips, but her fingers were still knotted in his shirt like she'd never let go. Sparrow walked on his left, Barrett slung empty, dragging a broken bayonet. The rest fanned out in a ragged line that would VA looked pathetic if it hadn't he been the most terrifying thing the galaxy ever saw. Then the sky tore open again. Not like the first invasion, this was quieter, deeper, a sound you felt in the marrow instead of the ears. The stars themselves blinked out one by one, as if someone was switching off the universe. The bombardment stopped mid-fall, kinetic rods hanging frozen above us like God had hit pause. Every Dominion HUD went dark, every revenant froze mid-step, eyes rolling white. Sirach's skiff dropped 10 meters straight down before its gravitics screamed back online, and the Viceroy's voice cracked for the first time in recorded history. Containment failure. All units, emergency protocol Omeganal. The anchor is awake. Jox felt it first in his teeth, a vibration older than language. Ellie's eyes snapped open, clear for the first time in months, and she whispered, "Jox, it's singing." From the direction of Lake Michigan, something rose. It looked like a shadow wearing starlight, vast and fluid and wrong, edges flickering between shapes whale. Cathedral City, child faster than the eye could track. It had no fixed form because it had outgrown the need for one sometime before. Multicellular life crawled out of Earth's oceans. The Dominion had called it the anchor, the old prison, the reason we never come here. Humanity had called it different names across the ages. Prometheus, Quetzalcoatl, the dream of the deep. Turns out, every culture that ever looked at the night sky and felt something looking back was hallucinating. It was ours. The thing the Dominion spent 10,000 years making sure stayed asleep wasn't their weapon. It was our goddamn guard dog. Sirach screamed orders in a language that hurt to hear, but the Legion didn't move. Couldn't. Every piece of Dominion tech on the planet was locking up, rewriting itself, turning its weapons inward because the anchor had finally recognized the frequency it was bred to answer. Human pain, human refusal, human love so fierce it could crack planets. Doc Patel had died shoving a virus into the relay, but the virus wasn't code. It was a lullaby reversed. The off switch flipped to on. 8 billion deaths, 1 dying girl's heartbeat, and 43 stubborn apes walking into fire had been the final notes of the song that woke it up. The anchor spoke, and every human left alive heard it in their mother's voice. "I was dreaming. You called me. I am sorry I took so long." Then it looked at the Dominion with something that might have been pity, if pity could burn stars. The revenants dropped first, collapsing like puppets with cut strings, their stolen faces melting into blank ceramic. Insect troops followed, chitin splitting as the implants in their brains turned to molten slag. Sirach's skiff tried to run, engines flaring white-hot, but the anchor reached out not with hands. It didn't need hands and folded space like paper. The skiff simply ceased, folded into a place that had no dimensions and no mercy. The Viceroy had time for one last sound, a thin, insectile keen of pure animal terror, before silence swallowed the battlefield. The anchor turned to us then, and the 43 of us should have died of sheer scale, but it shrank, condensed, became something almost human, tall, sexless, made of night and embers, and knelt in the snow in front of Jox. It reached out and brushed Ellie's cheek with fingers that weren't fingers. The fever broke instantly. Color flooded back into her face, lungs filling with clean air for the first time since the sky cracked. She stared up at it, eyes wide, and the anchor smiled with a mouth that was only approximately a mouth. "Little warrior," it said, "your brother kept the promise." Go eat popcorn. Then it looked at Jocks, and for the first time since Sangan, he felt small, but not in a bad way. The voice was gentle now, ancient and tired and fiercely proud. You woke me with nothing but spite and love. No other species in 15 billion years ever managed that. They were afraid of you long before they ever found your world. They should have stayed afraid. Jocks found his voice. What? What the hell are you? We are what happens when a species loves its children enough to weaponize gods. The anchor stood, growing again until it blotted out the sky, and every surviving human on Earth felt warmth for the first time in years. Cities that had been dark for months flickered back to life. Medical pods in Dominion camps opened and started healing instead of harvesting. The orbital fortresses turned their guns outward and waited for orders that would never again come from insect mouths. Across the galaxy, Dominion worlds went dark one by one as the anchor's song spread faster than light. Waking things humanity's distant ancestors had left sleeping in the bones of conquered stars. The empire that had crushed 432 civilizations began to die screaming, because every chain they'd ever forged had been made to hold something else, and humanity had just slipped a leash. Jocks sank to his knees in the melting snow, Ellie laughing in his arms like bells, Sparrow staring at the sky with tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her face. The anchor's last words rolled across the world like sunrise. Go home, children. The universe is yours now. Try not to break it too quickly. And for the first time since the sky cracked open, humanity looked up at the stars and realized the monsters had never been out there. They'd been us all along, and we'd just decided it was time to come out and play. The anchor didn't hand us victory on a silver platter. It gave us the keys and walked away. The moment the Dominion's chains snapped, every piece of their tech on Earth turned neutral, waiting for new masters. Their ships hung in orbit like blind metal whales. Their ground legions stood frozen, weapons cold. The galaxy was holding its breath, and 8 billion half-dead humans suddenly had the biggest arsenal anyone had ever inherited. But weapons don't win wars, people do, and people were tired, hurt, and really pissed off. Jock stood in the ruins of the Calumet factory at dawn, Ellie asleep on a cot behind him, breathing clean for the first time in a year. Sparrow was on the roof with a pair of binoculars, and the first real smile anyone had seen on her since Ku-43 had become 400 overnight. Word spread faster than light when humans smell payback. Then 4,000. Then 40,000. Farmers showed up with combines welded full of rebar. Grandmothers rolled in on buses carrying crates of homemade thermite. A kid from Detroit drove a lowrider with a rail coil bolted to the hood and bassed so loud it rattled teeth. Someone found a working PA system and cranked Fortunate Son across the wasteland until every radio on the continent picked it up and played it back louder. We weren't an army, we were a riot with The plan was simple and insane, the kind only humans think is reasonable. Take the fight to the Dominion's regional capital, a Dyson ring megastructure around Proxima Centauri they called the Crown of Eternity. 432 species had been dragged there in chains over the centuries. We were going to burn the crown and salt the ashes. We left Earth and everything that still flew. Dominion cruisers crewed by mechanics who learned the controls off YouTube tutorials translated by teenagers. Cargo haulers piloted by longshoremen who'd never left Illinois before the sky cracked. One ancient space shuttle miraculously preserved in a museum, patched with duct tape and prayers, carried Ellie in a real med bay, and Jocks in the commander's seat because someone had to be in charge and he was the only one too stubborn to say no. The anchor opened the doors between stars like turning pages in a book, and we stepped through. The Crown of Eternity was bigger than imagination. A ring of night held together by gravity and arrogance, lit from within by the dying light of a caged red sun. 1,000,000 Dominion warships waited in perfect formation, because even terrified, they still had numbers that should have made gods flinch. We came in hot, shields half-functional, weapons jury-rigged, music screaming across every open channel. The first salvo was every nuke we'd hidden since the Cold War, launched from freighters that used to haul soybeans. The second was every kinetic rod we'd ever built, dropped from orbit like the wrath of an Old Testament god with a sense of humor. The third was us. Jocks's voice went out on wideband, calm as Sunday morning. This is Earth. You parked in our yard, heard our kids, and thought we'd just take it. Bad bet. The battle lasted 11 hours. We lost 62% of our ships in the first 6 minutes. We lost another 20 in the next 10. But every ship we lost rammed something bigger on the way out. Every pilot who died took 100 of theirs with them. We fought with wrenches and welding torches when the ammo ran out. We boarded their dreadnoughts wearing welding masks and carrying fire axes. A 70-year-old grandma from Tulsa flew a mining shuttle straight down the barrel of a planet killer and detonated her fusion core with a grin and a middle finger. They broke first. Not the ships. The idea of them! When the Crown's central AI realized the primates weren't stopping, weren't surrendering, weren't even slowing down, it tried to negotiate, offered us seats on the council, offered us entire sectors, offered us anything but the one thing we came for, the complete, permanent, non-negotiable end of the Dominion. Jocks answered by ramming the Commandeer Dominion flagship renamed the CSS Fuckaround and find out, straight into the Crown's primary power nexus. The impact punched a hole clean through the ring. Secondary explosions chased the breach like dominoes made of suns. The red dwarf at the center flared unstable, dying. Ellie's voice came over the open channel one last time, small and steady. "Jocks, I love you. Tell Sparrow, the popcorn's on me." He never got to answer. The Crown detonated in a sphere of white fire that lit half the galaxy for 3 full seconds. When the light faded, nothing remained but cooling debris and silence. Back home, people came out of bunkers and looked up at a sky that belonged to them again. No banners, no voices in their heads, just stars, quiet and waiting. Years later, explorers would find the wreckage drifting around Proxima. They'd find the blackened data core of the Dominion's central archive, and on it, one human voice file repeating on a loop. Jocks Harlan laughing through blood and static. The last thing he ever broadcast before the ram. "You wanted to see what happens when we run out of fear. Here's your answer, you sons of bitches. Humanity doesn't lose. We just decide the price was worth paying." And somewhere out past the edge of everything, the anchor listened to the echo of that laugh, felt the warmth of 8 billion stubborn hearts still beating, and for the first time in 15 billion years, it wasn't alone anymore. The galaxy learned a new word that day, whispered in every language that survived. Terran. It didn't mean from Earth, it meant the ones who finish what they start. And they never parked in our driveway again. 53 years after the Crown of Eternity went supernova, Ellie Harlan stood on the observation deck of the Deep Space Habitat, Waypoint Aurora, watching a red dwarf sunrise crawl across a planet that didn't have a name, yet just a catalog number and a promise. She was 67 now, hair gone silver early the way it does when your childhood was spent coughing blood in a war zone. But her eyes still had that crooked spark that made strangers smile without knowing why. The limp from an old shrapnel wound clicked softly when she walked, and the kids who grew up on stories instead of bombs called her Aunt Ellie, even though half of them weren't human at all. Behind her, the deck filled with the usual morning crowd, a 7-foot reptilian ex-prisoner from the Dominion camps, who de-adopted Earth Blues guitar, a cluster of floating jelly children from Epsilon Eridani, learning to swear in English, and a quiet dark-haired girl who looked about 15 and never spoke above a whisper. Ellie saved the spot at the railing for that girl every dawn. Her name was Sophia, after a sniper who never got to see peace. The galaxy had changed because we refused to die pretty. After Proxima, the anchor didn't stick around to rule. It just opened every cage the Dominion ever built, handed us the keys, and vanished with something that might have been a wink. 432 species walked free that week. Most of them looked at us like we were either gods or devils and couldn't decide which scared them more. We told them the truth. We were just people who got tired of burying kids. That was enough. Earth healed slow. First we fixed the sky, then the soil, then the people. The medical pods we captured could regrow limbs, cure the cancers the Dominion used as leashes, even roll back radiation scars. We used them on everyone, human, alien, didn't matter. Some nights the lines outside the clinics stretched for miles. Former enemies holding each other up because legs can't work when you've been in chains for generations. We never asked for thanks. We just asked them to pass it on. Jocks never came home. They found the data core of the fuck around and find out drifting in the Proxima debris field, still repeating his last laugh. They built a memorial on the moon's simple black stone. No statue, just his voice on loop for anyone who needed reminding what defiance sounds like. Ellie visited once a year on the anniversary, left a bag of Garrett's popcorn on the plaque, and told him about the new worlds that smelled like rain. Sparrow made it out of the war, barely. Lost an eye and most of her hearing on the port side, but she lived long enough to teach half the galaxy's orphans how to shoot, how to laugh, and how to never trust anyone who calls you primitive. She died old, drunk on real vodka, surrounded by grandkids with Ukrainian surnames and tentacles. They still tell her stories in the fleet academies, how one 17-year-old girl made an empire flinch. Humanity never built another empire. We didn't need to. When you've already burned the biggest one in history to the waterline, borders feel kinda pointless. Instead, we built way stations, gardens, schools that taught calculus next to rifle maintenance, next to alien poetry. We spread slow, careful, the way you move after breaking every bone and learning you can still walk. Every ship carried a seed vault, a library, and a rule carved into the hull: never again on our watch. The reptilian guitarist, his name was Kress, came up beside Ellie now, carefully tuning a battered Stratocaster he'd printed from plans older than his species. "Morning, Aunt Ellie, you ready?" She smiled, the kind that started wars and ended them. Born ready. Today was graduation day for the first class of the Waypoint Academy. Kids from 50 species who'd never known slavery were about to get their wings. The ceremony was held on the new planet below green oceans, breathable air, continents shaped like broken hearts, slowly growing whole. They'd voted to name it Harlan's Rest. Ellie tried to argue, but the motion passed unanimously, and she learned long ago you don't win fights with people who owe you their childhoods. She took the quiet girl's hand. Sophia wore Sparrow's old eye patch, a gift from a woman she never met, hand, walked to the shuttle pad. The deck speakers crackled, and a recording played Jox's voice, rough and tired and proud. The last thing he ever said before he rammed the crown. "Humanity doesn't lose. We just decide the price was worth paying." Every kid on the deck, human or otherwise, knew the words by heart. They said them together, soft as prayer, loud as thunder. The shuttle dropped through cloudless sky to a field already full of people waiting. Ellie stepped out last, looked at the crowd: scales, feathers, fur, skin in every color evolution ever invented, and felt the old ache in her chest loosen for the first time since she was 14 and dying in a basement. She took the podium, no notes, no speech prepared, because some things you don't rehearse. "I was supposed to die before any of you were born," she started, voice steady. "So were a lot of us. We didn't get fancy powers or ancient gods on our side. We got mad. We got even, and then we got better." She looked out at the sea of young faces and smiled until it hurt. "Your turn, don't waste it." The applause wasn't loud. It was quiet, fierce, the sound of chains that would never fit these wrists. Somewhere in the back, Kress started playing Sweet Home Chicago, and every voice joined in, off-key and perfect. Later, when the new graduates were scattering to their first postings, Ellie stood alone on a hill watching twin suns set into an alien sea. The quiet girl Sophia came and stood beside her. "Aunt Ellie," she asked, "were you scared?" Back then, Ellie thought about it, about blood on snow, about promises made to dying brothers, about a galaxy that tried to teach humanity its place and learned the hard way, we don't have one. "Every damn day," she said. "But fear's just fuel if you aim it right." Sophia nodded, young eyes old as stars. "Good, I think I'm ready." Ellie put an arm around her shoulders, and together they watched the night come in, full of ships and songs and futures no empire ever imagined. Out there, somewhere past the dark, the anchor still drifted, listening. It never spoke again, but sometimes, when a child laughed too loud, or a tyrant fell, or a new world took its first breath, the stars flickered like something ancient was smiling. We didn't conquer the galaxy. We just made it impossible to conquer us. And that was always enough. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.